Welcome to Fairy Tale Access, where the head fairy's quest is to prove that fairy tales do exist in actual time, rather than once upon a time. Together, we will unravel the heroes, young and old, who turn dreams into reality. These are the people who still believe in happily ever after. The discoveries will bend even our most cynical non-believers into believing in fairy tales. Hello, welcome to Fairy Tale Access. Today, we're going to unravel a true story that brings home a point once stated by Eleanor Roosevelt. She said, "We gain strength and courage and confidence by each experience in which we really stop to look fear in the face. We must do that which we think we cannot." The fear that my guests faced directly in the face is one that was random and unexpected. The two women with me today were victims of a violent crime, and their courage and determination to confront that evil often tested their confidence about obtaining justice and accountability. But they are here to tell you their story to make sure that your rights are protected. The story of my guests, Lynn Briggs and Carolyn McEntee, started on May 31st, 2010. As EMTs, they received a 911 call to respond to someone having difficulty breathing once they arrived on that sunny Monday when everyone else was going to parades. Their lives were forever changed by unexpected violence. Carolyn, can you tell us what happened after that 911 call?
Yes, I can. The first 911 call came in at 0756 to Amherst Communications Center for a need for an ambulance to respond mutual aid to the town of Mount Vernon for a 28-year-old female having difficulty breathing. We responded to that call at 0757 to 27 Old Milford Road in Mount Vernon, and we arrived at the scene at 8:05. And we got out of the ambulance. There were three of us, three women, and Lynn was driving. I was in the front passenger seat, and the other girl was in the back of the ambulance. And as we were exiting the ambulance, we saw a male and a female coming down the stairs from the house. And they were arguing. We had no idea what their relationship to each other was, but it was pretty clear as we were walking up there that what appeared to be the 28-year-old female with difficulty breathing was not. She was able to speak in full sentences. She didn't look pale. She didn't look like she was sweating, nothing like that.
So would that be a red flag for you?
It would be.
If you arrive there and
Yes.
you're called for one thing and nothing is occurring like the call?
Yes. Well, the original red flag that went up for us was the fact that they were exiting the house. Frequently, that shows that there's something in the house that they don't want anyone to see.
Correct. In addition, she had a head covering and sort of a scarf-like thing, and it was across the lower part of her face. So that was also sort of a strange indication of, if you're having difficulty breathing, why is there anything impeding your face? So we immediately slowed down.
Okay. And then what happened?
Well, we noticed that there was a suit coat on the ground, and the female sat down on the suit coat. The man stayed standing up. They were still arguing, and at that point, we need to start asking questions. Why did you call for the ambulance? What happened? Etc. Things like any medical problems, any medications, any allergies, etc. And I was asking the man.
Okay, and were you able to ask those questions and get answers?
At first, yes, because we asked them pretty quickly.
So were there any medical problems or medications that you were aware that she was
No,
taking?
the male denied that there were any medications. He said she used to take one particular drug, Cymbalta, which is for depression, but she did not take that anymore.
Right. At that point, we were standing side by side, and she had spoken with the male, and I had heard these questions, so I turned my attention to the patient sitting on the suit coat directly in front of me, maybe 3-4 feet away, and I asked the same questions of the patient. She's obviously alert, she's obviously conscious, able to speak, so I need to speak directly with her. I asked the same questions. Do you have any medical history? No, I don't. Do you have any allergies to medications? No. Are you taking any medications? No. At this point, we need to move on and figure out what's going on. So I said, has anything happened recently? Are you feeling anxious? And the minute those words were out of my mouth, she pushed up from the ground and launched her head and tried to headbutt me full in the chin and the chest, as if to take out my airway and severely injure me. The language that came out of her mouth at that time, I seriously have to say I haven't even heard in the worst parts of different towns that I've worked in.
And you both have a lot of experience as EMTs, so you've confronted angry people before. How much experience do you have together?
Together, it's 42 years.
Okay.
I've been in EMS since 1978,
Okay.
so 34 years.
So,
I've been in 8 years.
this behavior was different, though, than anything you've encountered?
Different than any other patients that we've transported. We're both full-time 911. I originally was working for Rockingham Ambulance and then was hired at AMR. Carolyn worked for Golden Cross, full-time 911.
Okay,
So
back to the story. So you were prepared.
Correct.
You have the experience. You know how to confront people that are angry.
Well, it's not even confront. It's really just de-escalate and speak with them and try and get to a nice, calm ground and find out what's going on without agitating or exacerbating the situation. And
So when she
it just
came
never.
at you, was she able to hit you? Or?
She headbutted me full force with her head towards my chin, and out of the corner of my eye, I could hear Carolyn say no, and her hands went up and deflected it, and there was this loud sort of pop, crack in my jaw, extreme pain, and I was driven back immediately. Our attacker, at this point, the female, turned and headbutted Carolyn square in the chest and airway and drove her back 10 feet onto the ground. I immediately followed, and together we both pulled and got her onto her back and under control somewhat. It was about 2 minutes, maybe a minute and a half at that point, but it was just, I think we saw every inch of that lawn that day.
Wow.
Yes.
So what else happened during this struggle?
Well, once we got her down on the ground, Lynn was taking care of her left arm, trying to get that up and away. And I was taking care of her right arm, putting both of my hands on it. And as Lynn was trying to get control of her left arm, she came up almost to a sitting position and she bit me on the elbow. It was extremely painful, and I knew that I couldn't let go because it would be worse. The bite looked like, according to the first officer on the scene, it looked like a half of a baseball coming off of my elbow, and it was swollen that far already.
Well, I think in being close proximity, I was less than a foot away. The sound was just horrendous. And initially there was some blood, but because it swelled up so quickly, that was immediately controlled. But at that point, we really knew we were in the fight of our lives, that this was do or die. And Carolyn had to position herself across her torso, controlling the right arm, now that she's got a bite on her right arm. So now I have to take control of the head, the shoulders, the upper body, and the left arm. And every time I tried to position myself, she would turn her head and try and bite my thighs, bite anything. At one point, she pulled her left arm and had her finger in my left eye and was trying to gouge my eye out. During this whole time, there is just this absolutely disgusting flow of filthy language.
And through this entire event, which didn't last very long until this point, the male was just standing there. He never made any gesture to try and help us, to try and hold her down or anything.
Were you able to radio for help? Do you have radios that do that?
We each have radios. I was not in a position that I was able to take either hand off of her at that time. And Lynn finally maneuvered herself so that she could activate her lapel mic, where the radio is, to call for help for us. The problem being is that we did not hear anything.
There was no response.
No response.
When I was able, as she said, to maneuver and get onto the lapel mic, which is up here on your shoulder on a radio strap, the fight was still so violent, very loud, that all I could say was, we need police backup, I need them now. There was no response. Continued to tussle. Carolyn and I had a lot of eye contact. We worked together in other services. So I was able to reach again and ask for help. I need PD. We need them now. Still no response. We can't hear anything. I called a total of 4 times, and I believe on the 3rd and 4th time, I was a little stressed. I was yelling a bit. And this whole entire time, from when we called to when the first police officer arrived, was approximately, I believe, 14 minutes. And in that whole time, there was nothing, no sirens in the distance, nothing to indicate anybody had heard us.
And the gentleman that you said was standing there when you originally arrived,
Yes.
he did
Never identified himself either.
He didn't identify himself until
he
later
intervene?
on.
No.
He never interacted with us except for one instance after the female bit me. He did kneel down for a short period of time and said, "Please don't hurt her." And I replied to him, "Hurt her? She just bit me." And that was the last contact we had.
So when we got in the ambulance, I immediately put ice onto Carolyn's elbow, washed it off, because quite frankly, it was a human bite. So we're not really sure of what germs, what we've been exposed to. She spit in my mouth, she spit in my eyes. I don't know if she's got hepatitis B, hepatitis C, AIDS, or anything. So at this point, we're just trying to get on an even keel. I get out the med box for Carol, because she's having a very difficult time holding things, and that's when I discover I'm not able to hold on to things. There's something wrong with my right hand, but I don't know, am I tired? Just don't know. So between us, we get the medications and step out of the ambulance.
Okay. And so did the police officer then take her away?
No, they did not. For a brief period of time after she was handcuffed, there was really nothing anyone was saying. So I figured that since no one else was doing anything, I probably should step up to the plate and start with taking care of this patient as to medicating her because of her violent nature.
And now, did she say anything to the police officers when the police officers arrived?
Yes, she did. She was very verbal with them. She would go.
Was there anything that stuck out more in your mind than
shoot me in the face, give me your gun, I want to kill you? Just again, very homicidal, suicidal type comments. Theirs were not sexual. The comments that she threw at them were not sexual in nature. They were not personal. They were not body.
Right, but because she attacked you, didn't the police take her away?
No, they did not. That's when I decided that didn't appear that they were going to arrest her. So I needed to take control of the scene and medicate her. So that's when we went back to the ambulance, and I got a drug that we use per the state of New Hampshire protocols called Haldol. It's an antipsychotic drug, but it's used for us in violent behavioral instances.
So at that point, did they bring somebody else in to back you up? Because obviously you're not fit for duty.
They did not.
They did not.
So who transported this girl to the hospital?
We did.
We ended up having to transport this person. We were told there were no crews, no ambulances available. And at the time, we're just so happy to be alive and so lucky that somebody's there that we just weren't thinking down those lines. It was more, okay, we have no backup coming for us or to take this patient. We need to continue. And at that point, the chief of police of Mount Vernon, Chief Aspinwall, showed up, and he began to speak with this male, who at that point decided that he would tell us who he was, or he told the chief who he was.
So this must have been overwhelming. After you get out of the hospital, you go back to the station. I'm sure you filled out reports. What was the reception like there?
Well, quite frankly, when we were at St. Joe's, no one had approached us. We hadn't heard from the town of Amherst. We didn't hear from our boss, the director of Amherst EMS. We had heard from nobody. So I took it upon myself, while we were waiting to be treated, that I called him on a cell phone, and there was no answer. And I simply said that we had been on a call, we had been violently assaulted, we had had to transport the patient, that there weren't any crews available, dropped her off, and that we were getting treated at St. Joe's Hospital, and never heard anything after that. No one showed up to be with us. However, Chief Aspinwall from the town of Mount Vernon came, and he met with us, asked a couple of questions, and took a few pictures, and that was pretty much it. We went back to Amherst EMS. There were still nobody to relieve us. There were no crews available, and we were asked, could we fill out a internal incident report, which is a page and maybe a paragraph of the description. And then we did the official New Hampshire Tempsus report, which is sent directly to the hospital. At that point, I think it was somewhere around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which is, you can see, quite a large time period before we were relieved of duty.
Right.
And they walked in and laughing and joking and never asked us how we were, didn't ask what happened. The police officers that came downstairs, because Amherst EMS is directly underneath the police station, never asked us about our injuries. How are you? Can I do something for you? Just absolutely left there. We were nothing to anybody.
Wow. So was it just maybe lack of communication at the beginning?
I really don't know. That would be speculation on my part. Then I received a phone call at home on my cell phone about 10 o'clock that night, and it was from the Amherst EMS director stating that he was on vacation, excuse me, in Maine, and he just kept saying things like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this has happened. Oh my gosh, I don't know what to say. I can't believe this has happened. In the 10 years I've been here, we've never had a workers' comp injury. And
At no point, I don't
a little
think.
stunned at that, but at no point did he even ask how I was or how Lynn was, if I knew, or anything. And he said to me, wow. He goes, well, when this thing is all over, I'm going to take you girls out to Amigos for margaritas. And that was the end of the conversation.
Okay. So in New Hampshire, we have a victim's bill of rights, because this would have been a felony, correct?
Correct.
So do you feel that your rights, well, when did you find out about your rights?
Not for a while.
Unfortunately, from that point on, for 2.5 months, there was no contact with us. The police never contacted us. The selectmen from either town never contacted us.
What about the prosecutor?
We didn't even know there was a prosecutor. No one asked us any questions. There was no investigation. So we were pretty much waiting around for someone to contact us. We didn't even know what the charges were at that point. We didn't know if they were misdemeanors, felonies, who was bringing the charges. That had never been discussed. We had never been approached. We had also had 2 major surgeries on our right arms at that point and were in full arm casts. We read multiple articles in the newspapers, and that was the only way we found out that our actual hearing or trial, I'm not sure which it is, was on August 11th, 2010. And if we hadn't been reading those articles, We would never have known. We walked in that day in the Milford District Court, hustle bustle, no one comes near us. We ask a few questions. Where's our case? Where do we go? No answers. Again, no prosecutor, no police approaching us, nothing. No one from the town coming to support us or represent us or anything. And finally, this woman walks up to us, and it's Nancy Bean Foster from the union leader. Okay. And she says, "Are you two the victims of that assault?" And we said, "Yes, we are." And she said, "May I interview you?" And we said, "Yes, but could we ask you a couple questions?" And we asked her what was going on. And she said, "Well, don't you know?" And I said, "Apparently not." She said, "Well, the female that assaulted you just took a butcher knife to her brother last night and was arrested. They're having her arraignment this morning, and then they'll get to yours." So here, a relative perfect stranger to us has more information than we do. She knows what the charges are. Mm-hmm. And so she goes into the courtroom, watches the first proceeding, comes back out and tells us that it was a fiasco. It was just, she's never seen anything like it. We go in and, for our court hearing, and we're sitting way at the back. No one tells us where to sit, so we just sit at the back. And this man comes in and approaches us and says, "Are you Lynn and Carolyn?" We looked at him and said,
"Yes."
"Yeah, but..."
"Who are you?"
"Yeah, who are you?" And he says, "I'm the assistant county prosecutor. I'm Ross McLeod. I need to talk to you after." Walk to the front.
After the hearing.
After the
Correct,
hearing.
after the hearing.
Okay.
We don't have any education in the judicial process or the law. I've been to court several times for different ambulance calls, but we were always kept outside, gave our testimony, and then left. Mm-hmm. So I really wasn't sure what was going to happen, what we were supposed to do, or what was supposed to happen, and no one told us.
We just know that a little bit through, these three lawyers went up to the front to the judge. There's a lot of whispering. We can't hear anything. And Nancy Bean Foster sitting up at the front is turning around, giving us face signals such as, "Oh my God, I can't believe I heard this," just very visibly upset, right. And we don't know what's going on. We do have the court.
We have the court documents.
Correct.
So from the transcripts, what went on with those?
Apparently, from the court transcripts, the judge asked if the crime victims were in the courtroom, and he was told no, and we were very clearly sitting at the back.
And the assistant prosecutor had just checked with you.
Yes.
Correct.
And he didn't,
No, he did
not to step up and say that you were there to the judge?
Apparently not, according to those documents. The Judge Paul Moore, also asked them if the parties and the crime victims were all in complete agreement. At that point, we didn't even know we were crime victims. Yeah. And again, it's very difficult to hear, and we're getting this from the court documents. And they were told, yes, we were all in agreement. Mm-hmm. Next thing we know, the case is conditionally null prost. We don't know what that is. Gavel goes down, everybody leaves the courtroom, and Ross McLeod says, "Come with us." And we said, "No, we're not leaving till she is out of the courtroom. I'm not moving." Mm-hmm. We walk out afterwards. We have a brief discussion in one of the side rooms.
Yes.
And he says he asks us, "Did anybody contact you?" No. Has anybody discussed this with you? No. Did anybody tell you what your crime victim's rights are? And we said, no. He said, did anybody tell you what the charges are? No.
Wouldn't it have been more appropriate for him to have asked those questions before
one
going into court?
One would think.
Yes, one would think that they...
Because the audience may not know, but a null pros means that the prosecutor is not going to prosecute the case and that they've made a plea agreement. So did you find out what the plea agreement was?
Yes. We found out that she was going to be involved in the Nashua Mental Health Court, and she was going to be seeing a psychiatrist and monitored weekly for this for a year. And if she didn't have any further brushes with the law, everything would be expunged from her record.
Which is actually a little comical because this was all under the former county prosecutor, Robert Walsh, who for the last 2 elections has lost. he did an interview in August of this year because he decided to run again. And he said in this interview that the National Mental Health Court was for petty crimes only. And it says to me that he took the felony charge, reduced it to a misdemeanor, and then dumped it in National Mental Health Court, which is really for people that need help, that either don't have a job, don't have enough money for their medications. Anybody, returning military vets, those are the people that need National Mental Health Court.
Right.
Obviously not this person of means and et cetera. And
Right. Well, there were several articles that covered Attorney Walsh's involvement in this, and that, you know, he's just saying he made a bad decision. But during my research, what really concerned me was that one of the articles was that the New Hampshire Attorney General's office scolded Attorney Walsh for violating victim rights. He's an attorney. He wasn't disbarred for being unethical and not informing you of your rights and telling a judge that there was a plea bargain.
No. Apparently not.
You have to wonder how the Attorney General office operates.
Well, funny enough, the Attorney General's office, Ann Rice, contacted us approximately a week after the August hearing at Milford District Court.
But not before?
No,
not before.
Again, no one ever contacted us until after this court hearing. And her concern was that he had never spoken to us, that no one from the entire county prosecutor's office had approached us. We ended up having a meeting with her end of August with Ann Rice, and I did. I believe Carolyn was either in surgery, I can't remember, or maybe perhaps away. And Ann Rice explained to me what had happened, and essentially the former county prosecutor, Robert Walsh, had taken this case on his own, did not share it with his office, did not tell any staff in his office what was going on, made this decision on his own, made the plea bargain on his own, and rolled apparently all the arrests for that entire summer into this null pros. She had attacked 2 Nashville police officers. One of them I have been on a 911 call with in Nashua, and really hit close to home.
Exactly. She was at a mental health facility, and at that time when she assaulted the 2 Nashville police officers, she had left that facility after pulling a fire alarm. This facility is not just for mentally ill people, it's for people to come to recover after surgeries and be rehabilitated.
Right.
So that was pretty serious, but that was thrown out of court.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Valdez was in another ambulance, and the EMT, who asked not to be disclosed, that I spoke with, told me that the only difference in the way that she was treated compared to the way you were treated was that she knew about her actions and her violent tendencies in advance. She was forewarned at the hospital, so she kept her distance. She made sure that she didn't feed into anything that she said. She didn't look at her. She didn't talk to her, really, except to answer her and tell her to behave. But she knew exactly where to sit in the ambulance, and she felt that that was the biggest difference. So I did look in, for EMT standards across the United States. Apparently there really isn't much in the way of standards that are set nationally, which was really odd. But one thing I did find was that on a 911 call, you have a responsibility to tell the 911 call what the call is about. So if it was for difficulty breathing, and you went there and nobody had a breathing problem at all, somebody called in a false 911 call.
That's correct.
Correct.
If they know somebody's violent and you're going to go to a brawl, like a barroom fight.
Exactly.
Generally, PD is on scene.
Right, and they're going to
stage.
tell you ahead of time that the person is violent.
Correct.
Okay, so when I went through the newspaper articles, I found out that the father in this case is a Dr. Romulo Valdez. Do you know if any charges were ever brought against him?
Not to our knowledge.
Not to our knowledge.
But he called in a false 911 call because there was obviously no difficulty breathing. The woman, his daughter, was violent. He knew that she was violent and being treated beforehand, and he told you that she was not taking any medications and that there was no issues. I guess it's questionable about whether or not he interceded, but the fact that the 911 call was obviously false, that he didn't forewarn you, would lead one to believe that as a psychologist, aware of these conditions, that he broke his oath of office as well.
Yes, it does. It appears to be like that. Dr. Valdez did say to us, once she was medicated, that he was going to take her to the hospital himself, but that he was afraid of her.
And this case is open to the public under the New Hampshire right to know law up until, or the Federal Freedom of Information up until the mental health portion. So before that, all of this was covered in the newspaper by several different papers. And, you know, the case ends, it's in the mental health court, but now you both have extenuating injuries.
Yes.
And the case has now been reopened, is that correct, or re-indicted?
She was re-indicted.
Well, if we back up a second, what happened was we got a new county prosecutor. There was a new election, and the name of this gentleman was Dennis Hogan. So Carol and I, after a second surgery for both of us, and again in casts, decided, let's give this man a call. Let's see what we can do, and if nothing else, let's find out what crime victims' rights are about. What should have happened? What can we do? Is there anything we can do to prevent this? This is horrible. So Carolyn gave Dennis's office a call. He wasn't in. She left a message, and he called back 1 hour later. He called back and said, what can I do for you? And Carolyn said, could you please just meet with us?
I said, could you please just meet with us face to face so that he can see who we are and what we are?
Yep. We went.
And he said, absolutely. And we went to see him the next day.
Exactly.
The next day.
Which is more than anything we've had.
How much time has passed?
9 or 10 months.
9 or 10 months,
Yes.
and you finally get somebody who's willing to listen to you and sit down with you.
He was fabulous. He rallied his entire office. He had us meet with Ross McLeod, and we were actually finally given a crime victims advocate. Why are crime victims less than a criminal? Why are we nothing? That is very scary. For people that don't know anything or are uncomfortable questioning or pushing the envelope, they might walk away from something like this. To me, the police, their job is to serve and protect.
Dennis Hogan was the one that finally took over, and we're going to speak with him in just a couple of minutes. But what is the message that you want to get out to other victims of crimes?
To be proactive, to not sit back like we did, to go to the local police department, or in the case of a felony, to the county prosecutor's office, and ask to be told what's going on, to be told of all the dates, to ask for the paper. They actually have a handout for crime victims, that you do have rights, and you need to demand that your voice be heard. And until we met Dennis, until we met Catherine McNaughton, we had no voice. And as first responders, that's really scary, because then it shouldn't matter who you are, what your job is. A crime victim should have a rights. You should have equal treatment in the judicial system. You are a person. You do need to be heard. And this needs to be fixed. It truly does. And I believe Dennis Hogan and his entire office, and I do mean the entire office, has really reached out to us. They have extended the hand. They have been sincere. Anytime we need anything, they've helped us. They have been open. They've been transparent. There are no secrets in that office. And they truly believe that as a crime victim, we don't get to pick our lawyer. We don't get to pick our defense. You're handed to somebody, and they believe that is an important job, and they believe it.
Yes, you have only the prosecutor, the Hillsborough County Prosecutor's Office, as your attorney. And we, in essence, were denied an attorney during the first case with Robert Walsh and Ross McLeod. And I think a lot of people would just say, okay, well, I guess that's the way it goes. And we were still going through major surgeries, had a lot of psychological problems as far as having post-traumatic stress disorder, et cetera. We were looking for someone to help us. And it wasn't until Dennis came that we were indeed validated that we were crime victims, and we were given a victim's advocate, which was Captain
So he made
McNaughton.
you feel vindicated and as if you had access to justice?
Yes.
Exactly.
Because we felt that we were being treated by the Amherst EMS and Amherst Police Department, that somehow we had caused this, and that it was our fault that it happened. And we were just doing our job. And we transported that female and gave her every single courtesy, and we were very, very polite to her the entire way to the hospital after she had done this to us.
Well, I want to thank you both for sharing your story. And we're going to talk to Dennis to find out more about what is supposed to have gone on in that office at the beginning of your case. Although I did want to let you know that our sponsor today, Amy Cutter of Camlaw Designs in Boston, Massachusetts, because you have so many insurmountable odds that you seem to be up against, she wanted you to know that as you pursue your quest to seek justice for all the wrongs that you've confronted, that you're never alone. We're all rooting for you. And she made you especially some sterling silver necklaces just to keep your faith and let you know that.
Sweet.
That is so kind.
I hope we
That's
can tell her
wonderful.
personally, but in the meanwhile, could you thank her?
Please.
This is awesome that finally we're being able to help people and be heard and have a voice. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's my
Thank you.
pleasure.
Thank you.
And it was her pleasure too. But thank you so much for allowing me to share your story with our viewers. And if anybody in New Hampshire is the victim of a violent crime, if you look under New Hampshire RSA 21, it'll tell you what all of your rights are. And you do have the right to be treated with fairness and respect. And part of that fairness is that the person that hurt you is held accountable. And I want to thank you two ladies for all the work that you're doing to get this story out and make sure that, you know, these public officials are accountable. Thank you.
Thank you.
My
Thank you for
pleasure.
letting us come and tell our story.
Oh, my pleasure. We appreciate you telling it. And after a word from our sponsor, we'll be right back to interview County Attorney Dennis Hogan and see what his office does to protect victims.
Thank you.
Thank you. After hearing about the experiences with Lynn and Carolyn, our previous guests, I now have County Attorney Dennis Hogan here. And he's going to talk to us about what his office does to protect victims of crimes. Welcome to the show, and thank you for being here.
You're welcome. It's nice to be here.
Thank you. So, what are victims' rights, and what does your office do to protect victims in New Hampshire?
Well, the victim's rights come from what's called the Victim Rights Statute. So there's a list of things within the statute that was put in there about in the 1980s, sort of as a way to give victims some say in the process that people felt they weren't getting. Because of all the rights that are in the Constitution that protect somebody who's an accused, there's sort of this backlash to, let's give victims some rights. So they put it right in the statute. And it basically goes along the lines of information, and the ability to speak up during the whole process. And so they have to be notified of when things are going to happen. They have to be told that they're allowed to speak up. And if they disagree, because a lot of times what we do is we make agreements for a plea. And they have the option to come before the judge and say, look, I don't even agree with that plea. So certainly they have to be there. They have to be notified of that. And that's the thrust of the victims' rights statute. So in terms of our office and what we do, well, we have victims' rights advocates. And it's their job to make sure we follow that, make sure that the victims are informed, make sure that the information that they have is that they can come and be part of the process, speak to the judge at the times of the plea bargain or at the times of a sentencing. If there's a complete, if the person pleads guilty or they're found guilty in the trial, they can come before the judge and make their victim statement. Encourage the judge to do one thing or another.
Okay. Well, in the case of Lynn and Carolyn, they talked about how they came to your office and asked to talk to you and that you actually saw them right away.
Right.
Pretty impressive. But when you look at how well they speak of you and what happened with the previous prosecutor in that office, how does that happen in a prosecutor's office where they just ignore the victim's input as far as having the case put, was it no pros?
Yeah, I really think it was a matter of not following the system. The system is intended to do the right thing. If those people who know me from watching me on the school board, and I know that the public access is, showed hours and hours of me probably on the school board if people were even listening. Because I know some people told me they saw me on the school board channel. What was I saying, I asked. They said, we don't know, we weren't listening. We had the volume down, but they saw me.
But we're all
anyway,
listening, we all want to know.
But at any rate, I'm interested in the processes and in making sure the process goes right. And so that was the problem in this particular case. The process got short-circuited by not having the case come into the office as it normally does and have it assigned to a victim witness and a prosecutor and then having them go about the business as they normally would. That process got short-circuited by going directly to the head of the department and then having some things that the person thought was a good idea. There's a new mental health court, and he thought that was a good idea, and it went that direction and ended up being too quickly in that direction. So that's what caused the problem.
In the process, it appears that from the research about victims' rights and the advocate position in your office, that they just weren't even given any consideration.
Right, so that's exactly, the process wasn't followed. The victims' rights statute was not followed, and that was pointed out by the Attorney General's office, actually after I was elected. It hit the newspaper. But yeah.
But they didn't disbar him, they didn't publicly sanction him, they didn't publicly chastise him.
Well, I think chastise, yes, I think it was a public chastising. But that's the thing with the statute. There isn't an actual, there's no penalty in not following the victim statute.
Right, but you're still an attorney when you're acting as a prosecutor, right?
Yes, yeah.
So don't you have attorney's ethics that you have to follow and tell the truth?
Yeah, we have a certain, our ethical obligations are written out and our responsibilities are written out. And if we don't follow those, there is a process for us to be reprimanded for those kind of things. It doesn't fall in that category, though. It really falls in the category of you didn't follow this statute, and you look at the statute and you see that actually there's no penalties for not following the statute. So really, the only penalty is having the public know that you did it wrong, and But of course, I don't want the public to be thinking I'm doing it wrong, and so I want my office to be actively doing it, and we do everything we can to make sure that the victim statute is followed, and even if it wasn't there, in my mind, the logic of things is that's the way you'd want to do it. Because what you're doing is you're including people that you're working for. I mean, a victim is a taxpayer, and they should be listened to. They should be able to call and tell us what they want to tell us. And so I'm very much about that, having come from a customer service background before I even became an attorney. So that's important to me. So just the logic of it would make you want to follow the statute, but the statute's there in case you didn't. The logic of it didn't occur to you.
Goodness.
Yeah.
But it appears that you were able to make them feel vindicated and feel like they did actually have access to justice.
Right.
And
listening.
I think that's really important in the community as a whole, just because people do bad things, and people make choices. But when they make bad choices and other people suffer for it, I think you know, like divorce court, somebody wants to feel vindicated for having been wronged, or,
Right.
but
Yeah.
as a job, as your job, and other interviews that I've seen you in and different articles, you describe yourself as an administrator. So you're an administrator of litigators.
Wow,
And
that's true.
And I think that's a unique way to run the county attorney's office. And with your background as an attorney,
I don't think it's a unique way to do it. It might be a unique way to actually come out and sell it. And then I respect the audience enough to explain to them really what's going on. Instead of saying that I'm some great, you know, whatever, just explain to them, yeah, I'm the leader, I'm the administrator, I'm the manager. It gives the audience respect that, you know, this is really the way it is. Because in Rockingham County, it's that way as well. I mean, I sat down with the Rockingham County attorney before I ever took the job, and I had him explain it to me. And he said, you know, I don't have time to be in the court. I have all these administrative things I need to do. The reason we have so many assistant county attorneys is, is that there's so much work. And when you've got that big an organization, somebody has to watch over the whole organization. So
how many attorneys do you have working in your office?
20. There are 20 prosecutors, and there's another one who's an attorney that's not actually called a prosecutor, but you know, so.
So if you're not trying cases, that actually gives you the time to assess their skills, what
Yes.
they're best in, and
Yeah.
and then
The
do you
budget.
do
I have to do the budget. I have to, you know, there's some things that don't come around very often, but I'm involved with, like whether or not somebody should get a pardon, and whether we go to before the
right, and you have
governor for that.
And you have a really good domestic violence specialist, I heard.
Well,
so-
you know, actually, that's something that was in Manchester. It was a very good program, but because of the budget cuts, we had to decide where we were going to go with our money, and we actually managed to very neatly switch that over to Manchester handling it themselves. So
Oh,
Manchester
okay.
now takes those grants that we took and then adds the extra money. So we're no longer taking the grants and adding our extra money, because we did have budget cuts. I had an 8% reduction in my budget, and I had to manage where we were going to go with that. So, you know, that's
But
a
at
big
least
part
you
of it.
preserved it.
Yes, by not rushing into anything and talking through with people, you know, letting them know way ahead of time where I was coming from and what choices I was going to have to be forced to make. It allowed them to adjust. So it's about communication.
Right.
Because
And
if
by
I
the-
can communicate to them, they can react to it, and
So
nobody gets
when the cases
mad.
come in, do you actually assign them, or is it just a pick of the draw?
No, well, actually, when the cases come in, I have two first assistants, and they do the assigning. So, and the routine, and there are a lot, with 2,200 cases per year, plus
Wow.
or minus 100. There's a lot of routine stuff that I probably never see at all. But you know, we have meetings, and when the less routine and those things that are going to hit the papers or might be a little difficult, we'll hash those out. You know, and we use the intellect of all those people together, not just my own intellect. That would be kind of silly. that one person would try to make all the decisions. That would be silly. But there are those times when they can't, you know, consensus doesn't rule, and they come to me and say, Dennis, that's your decision. You're the top of the heap, and that's the one you got to make. So, and that happens on occasion, but really, it's not that often.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So how were you able to turn this case around for Lynn and Carolyn?
Well, I almost wasn't able to, frankly. When they first came to me, I thought it was all done, and I explained that to them. But the defendant happened to continue to get into trouble, which undid the agreement that had been made with the prior county attorney. And so we then said, okay, you know what, we are going to go forward. We're going to hold you to the agreement that you needed to behave, and you didn't, and so I made the decision. Yes, we will go forward from that point on, and not just look the other way about that. And that's how we started working in the getting into the position where we could actually satisfy them in what they wanted to, at least the minimum of what they wanted to get out of it.
So with the mental health courts, is there a process in place where they notify you if one of the defendants was not in agreement or not
Yes.
meeting their obligations?
Yeah, that's supposed to. I mean, most of the mental health court stuff is non-violent. In fact, I'm trying to think of a case after this one that was a violent act. We're trying. That's not the intention of the mental health court, and that's another one of the problems with the way this case went, is that, you know, was trying to move something into the mental health court that wasn't there. I mean, the mental health court is for those things that the person clearly has a mental issues, and they do something that's probably a property damage thing, or, you know, a public drunkenness, or a public
Nuisance.
yeah, I mean, things that, you know, just are rude because of where they are. So yeah, but the attorneys get notified, and most of them are handled actually in the circuit court, and so the prosecutors and liaison with the mental health community in the court is working with that person to make sure they stay on track. That's how most of them are handled.
Okay. And what do you think the strong points are that you bring to the office?
Well, I mean, the idea that I've led things in other ways. You look at the school board and trying to work with that. And I was the chairman of the policy committee. We kind of restructured the way the school board worked so that it worked better for the whole school system. I've done other things that are leading attorneys. When I was in law school, actually, I was elected to be the leader of the class. And after a year of that, and they liked the way that I handled them. It was kind of a hands-off thing. I wasn't trying to march around, hey, I'm the president, right? I was just, okay, I have these responsibilities, and here's how I'm going to do them. And so other attorneys, they like that way of doing things. So I brought that to it. And my customer service experience, just the whole office, I try to have the attitude of, we're here to serve, and that rubs off on everybody. And so those are the main things, I think.
So if anybody needs more information for domestic violence, you could tell them where to go now. If they were a victim of a crime or child abuse and neglect, any of those problem areas, they could call your office.
Absolutely.
If they didn't feel that their rights were being vindicated or the person didn't get a trial.
Yeah, well, anybody who has a crime, the first thing they do is, of course, to report it to the police.
Right.
And as it goes through that process, if they should be getting, if they're a victim of a violent crime, they should be getting a victim witness advocates that they will hear from. So if at some point that process, doesn't seem to be working for them, they don't seem to have been included in the way things were supposed to be, they can always give us a call. And I talk to people all the time who just think, it hasn't been working for them. And sometimes I'm just redirecting them and sending them to the right person.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
But some literature that was received from your office, you have an address confidentiality program. Mm-hmm. Now, what happens with the victim impact statements?
Well, that's what I mentioned earlier, where you have the ability to go before the judge and say, look, this is how this has impacted me at the time of sentencing. So,
Wow.
And the victim witnesses will help a person do that when they're the victim in the crime. And at times they even will read it. Some people are shy. They don't want to stand up in the court and do their presentation. So they can actually just write a statement and it'll be read by the advocate for them.
Oh, great. So your office balances the scales for everybody involved.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought of law is a sense of balancing the scales. Well, that's why they use balancing scales, right, to show law. But what has happened is somebody's been wronged, right?
Right.
And so the law is to keep you on the even plane that you thought you were going to be when you left home that day. Whether it's on the economic things or whether it's personal things, you want to be able to know that you can leave the house and go down to the, and when I talk to high school kids, I talk about the market as an actual market, not the market we think of, Wall Street and stuff, because when it started, it was just the market. And what we wanted law for was so we could go down and I could take my chicken and I could trade with your pig and I'd come home with bacon and you'd come home with eggs, and I already, so both of us became richer for that. But the system gets mucked up if there's somebody along the highway who robs us, or if in the market you're giving me fake bacon or whatever, all those things. It's grown into, where it gets to divorce court, where, you don't want somebody to be able to just manipulate another person so that they're put upon. They should be able to go to divorce court or family court and say, look, this guy's left me with these kids. I need help with that. Make them pay me money. So it keeps you on that even. So we continue to interact with each other and make ourselves richer by the interaction, because that is what makes people richer, is the interaction. So in my mind, law is like making us richer. And of course, there's a political debate about how much law there is. If the king is there taking all our chickens away, then that doesn't work out. It doesn't make us richer. But as long as it's a good, even law for everybody, it should make us all richer. And really, that is the reason. And Margaret Thatcher has said this. It's the reason that there's wealthy countries. You look at the wealthy countries, and they're all countries that are common law countries. New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, United States, Canada, England, all very wealthy because they have that common law idea where people get to interact with each other without getting, can I use the word screwed?
Yeah.
I'm trying to use a different word, but I couldn't think of one. After all that intellect, all I can think of is the word screwed. Oh, well, sorry.
Well, no, that's really the way their case sounded. It sounded terrible.
Right. Yeah, they definitely got taken down from where they were, and they, needed to have the legal system, the criminal system, come to their aid and make sure that they were able to get some compensation, because victims do get compensation in our plea agreements, and sometimes when the sentencing, the victim is given a compensation that the defendant has to make restitution for.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, having researched this and talked to these two women about your interaction on the case, I really have to say that it reminded me of a quote by Napoleon Bonaparte.
Wow.
He said, "Great ambition is the passion of a great character. Those endowed with it may perform very good or very bad acts." And I think the voters realized that in the primary because they voted for you.
Right.
But it all depends on the principles which direct them. And from interviews that I've seen with you, from the way that you interact with the public, and you come to the Fairy Tale Festival and you engage with the audience, and you're not there to promote politics. You're actually there showing that you're interested in what they do every day. Yeah. I think that really fits you. Mm. So good people do not need laws to tell them to act responsibly, obviously, but we do need somebody looking out for us when bad people find a way around it.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. We're very thankful that you're in office and for the time that you've done there.
Thank you. Thank you. And obviously, there's a good portion of the public that agrees, because I didn't even have an opponent in the primary. And I'm open to complaints, and don't get that many. So
that's good.
But if I do, I'm always trying to adjust to help, what the complaint is, and see what I can do for it if I can do anything. So.
Thank you so much for being here today and taking time out, and keep up the great job. We wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors.
All right, thank you.
My pleasure. And tune in next time, and don't forget, keep asking questions and always stand up and speak up for yourself.